Okay, how's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, well, so in today's episode, I thought I'd try to say something about the Roman poet Horace's famous phrase, Carpe Diem, a phrase which comes from a very short poem in Book 1 of his larger work of lyrical poems called the Odes, written in 23 BC, over 2,000 years ago. And if you don't already know, maybe the most popular modern use of Carpe Diem comes from the 1989 film Dead Poets Society, where Robin Williams, playing a maverick and inspiring English teacher, says to his class of students, Carpe Diem, or seize the day. Okay, well, so before I try to say something about the meaning of Carpe Diem, let me first quickly say something about the presentation or the context of this poem, which is only 8 lines long, by the way. Okay, so what's going on in the poem is that Horace himself, or some wise man, is addressing a girl named Luconoe, who may or may not be a slave or a servant. Now, this dialogue seems to be happening in front of the sea. Now, what's going on is that Luconoe seems to be in a hurry to both know and to live her future. I mean, she's poring over astrological writings, or horoscopes, basically, because she's trying to figure out what her future holds. Okay, but now, what Horace, or what this man advises her, is that she should not be preoccupied with long-term hopes and expectations like this, and she shouldn't be always thinking about how many years she has to live. No, what he advises her is to appreciate the day in all of its facets without thinking about an uncertain tomorrow. Actually, you know what? Let me just quote the last 2 lines in their entirety, because of course it doesn't get any better than the original. But also, that's where we get the famous mention of Carpe Diem. So this is what Horace says to Luconoe. He says, "Be wise. Strain your wines, and because of brief life, cut short long hopes. While we are speaking, envious life will have fled. Seize the day, trusting the future as little as possible." Okay, so that's essentially what's going on in the poem. But now let's focus in on that phrase, Carpe Diem, the seize the day part. So what does Horace mean by it exactly? Well, I think there's room for multiple interpretations here. But before I get to the translation, which makes its meaning much more nuanced and also ambiguous, let me go to the more obvious first. So I think that whatever else Horace intends, what he's clearly reminding us of is the certainty of death and the shortness of life, and with it, the urge to enjoy what we have now. In other words, we should live our life in a way that's in conformity with inevitable death. We should let the consciousness of impending death shape our lives in such a way that we enjoy the moment and not wait until it's too late. Okay, so that's that part. But now let's look at the translation of Carpe Diem in more detail. So, as it was in the passage that I just mentioned, Carpe Diem is often translated as seize the day. But here's the thing. That's not quite accurate. You see, the verb carpo can't really mean seize. No, what it means is something more like harvest or reap or pluck. So it's not seize the day, it's harvest the day, like harvesting and then plucking fruits or flowers. Now, that's significant. It's significant because when we translate it as seize the day, we strip it of its metaphorical and philosophical resonances. Simply put, it is a horticultural or gardening metaphor. And the language elsewhere in the poem, well, it's agricultural. And that matters because it changes the meaning. I mean, go back to seize the day for a moment. So what does that invoke or suggest? Well, there's an aggressive martial quality to it, right? A strike and conquer element. In other words, in seizing the day, you take whatever you can while you can. You exploit. You get as much done as possible. You take and you take and you do and you do. Now, that we translate it in this way makes a lot of sense in our particular time and context, in our post-industrial world. In a time when you could argue that time itself has become commodified, and when everything we do is about work and about productivity and about optimization. When the goal is more and plenitude and quantity. We must get out there in a mad rush and snatch what we can and then consume it. We must keep stuffing our face right up until the buffet ends. We must check off every item on our bucket list. We must live twice as fast and do twice as much. Okay, well, I don't think that this is what's going on in Horace's use of Carpe Diem. Again, his context is agrarian or rural. We have to think of the rolling hills and the pastures of central Italy, which is where he lived. And we have to think of the tranquility and the simplicity and the self-sufficiency that marks this sort of agrarian life, the peaceful harmony of life in a garden. Okay, so there's no mad rush to seize things here, in the sense that I described earlier. No, harvesting or plucking the day here is certainly something much, much less hectic and much less pathological. It's more gentle and more passive and more aesthetic or sensual. It's gathering up and plucking the fruits when they're ripe and just being in that particular moment. A moment that is self-sufficient unto itself. A moment of peace and enjoyment that doesn't need more to complete itself. You can't make it better. A moment something like Rousseau would later call the sweet sentiment of existence. But this idea of not needing more is crucial, I think, when it comes to getting at the heart of what Horace is saying. You see, let's not forget something. Let's not forget that Horace was an Epicurean, that he was deeply influenced by Epicurus, the Greek philosopher. And that's important because Epicurus had a very unusual but a very powerful idea of what true pleasure or enjoyment was. For him, genuine pleasure, the sort of pleasure that he associates with nature and with simple living, has a ceiling to it. That's to say, it can't be improved upon. In other words, for him, the pleasure of the present moment does not need to last in order to be perfect. No, a single instance of pleasure is as perfect as eternity. Just like the essence of a circle doesn't change whether the circle is big or small. So the goodness of pleasure simply doesn't depend on time or duration or addition. More of it is not going to give you anything that you don't already have. So that's Epicurus's great wisdom, and I think it's something that we should see as Horace incorporating into the meaning of Carpe Diem, namely, the true contentment of the present moment. Bye for now.